All right.
Okay, and welcome to Wisper University. I am your guest host today, Dario Mackins, and alongside me, as always, is the CEO of the company, Nathan Stute. So today we're going to be talking about building a strong leadership team. Before we get started down that path, I'll just give our viewers a little bit of background on myself. Again, I'm Dario Mackins. I've been with the company. This will actually be the 14th year. While I've been here, I started in sales, moved over into technical support, then transitioned from there into working with our network operations team. Spent a short period of time out in the field doing field services, then back to the office to where it was more on the management side of sales and then technical support. And even in the beginning stages of our leadership team, I played a part in, I think, the original leadership team that Wisper had put together. So what we're going to be talking about today is how to build a strong leadership team. And we'll go ahead and I'll pass it over to Nathan so he can give our viewers some background on himself.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Dario. Like you said, my name's Nathan Stuke, and I'm the CEO of Wisper. I was also the founder. And, looking back, I'm excited about this topic because it's so important to have a leadership team, and it's so important to have that structure. But then, well, I'm a startup of one. Why do I need a leadership team, and what does that look like? And so our topic today is going to be great. And so I'm going to start. I'm going to hijack the agenda just a little bit, Dario. And you've been with us for 14 years. You were very modest in the number of positions you've held and all you've done. But what do you get to do every 7 years? Because now you've been here for 14, so you've done it twice. What do you get to do after 7 years of working for us?
Yeah, so every 7 years, you actually get a 30-day hiatus you get to take that is paid, which does not count against your PTO. So it's 30 days you have to take. It's all paid. It's just a kind of way to recharge the batteries, get away from it all, spend time with family, do something you love and enjoy, not have to worry about work. And I mean, it's an awesome experience to take 30 days off and come back refreshed, recharged, ready to go. So being here, going on my 14th year, this will be my second go around of the 30-day hiatus. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, you got any big plans? Are you going to do like a staycation? Or are you going to go somewhere? Or?
Given the current conditions with COVID and everything, it's more than likely going to be that staycation. So
very good, very good.
Yep. So then moving on, you've kind of already touched on having a strong leadership team. You want to go ahead and talk more about building a strong leadership team or building Wisper's leadership team?
Yeah, I think that's why do you need a leadership team? When you're a central figure in the company, it's one thing. You can make kind of command and control decisions and you can run, but at some point you end up being the bottleneck. And as I've shared on other shows, that I realized I was the bottleneck in about 2007 and set out to be the unbottleneck and not the bottleneck. And really it had to do with forming that leadership team and empowering those leaders to make good decisions and decisions that you would have. And we have John Maxwell. He has his 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, and one of those is the law of the lid, where your organization won't grow anywhere past your lid, your own personal lid. And we can't do everything. We can't juggle everything. And having that strong team to rely on really, really allows you to then focus on what you need to be focusing on and being able to spend time where you need to spend time, increasing your leadership ability and strategically thinking about the company. And I think a lot of business owners I talk to are concerned about a leadership team. Well, some of them want to be the smartest one in the room, right? And I'm like, well, shucks, I want everybody else to be smarter than me, because if you're not, why would I hire you, right? I mean, please be smarter than me. This is awesome. I want to rely on their expertise. I'm not a marketing person. I'm not a salesperson, those type of things. But they kind of fall into this trap of, oh, well, I'm the owner or I'm the CEO. I have to be the smartest. And I think that's a fallacy. And when you really look at what a leadership team can do for you and bring to the table, it's way more beneficial than some of the drawbacks that you have with the leadership team.
Yeah, and just kind of speaking on that, I do remember the beginning leadership team, and that was a hindrance of, I think, the entire team, because everyone that sat around that table, no one wanted to take ownership and make the decisions. It was always, we would talk about things, but ultimately it was Nathan, right? So I'm not going to be responsible for that decision. So I'm just going to sit and I'm going to wait and let Nathan make the decision. So
Sure.
I could definitely see where, the leadership team is now transcended to a point to where, being comfortable to make those decisions, and that comes with having a strong leadership team around you.
Yeah. If you're going to wait for me to make all the decisions, why did we hire you?
Yes.
Right? I mean, go out on a limb, and you have to have a safe place to fail, and you have to have a safe place to learn. But you're absolutely right. If your leaders at any level of the company aren't taking ownership, then either you're not empowering them, and if you are empowering them, they're still not taking ownership, then they're the wrong leaders for what you need in your organization, for sure.
Mm-hmm. No, most definitely. Wisper's leadership team today. You want to talk about the process of what you use of kind of combining that group?
Yeah. So our leadership team, it's interesting over time. Early on, we didn't call it a leadership team. We called it a manager's meeting, right? Because we were all, 1 foot out the door for field services and making sure things were running, and 1 foot in the office doing the admin stuff. And as a small company, that's totally acceptable. But then as we grew and we did EOS, the Entrepreneur's Operating System, they talk about having that leadership team. Even a small company having a team and knowing who's responsible for what. And we've iterated over the years and had effective leadership teams and then not so effective, and what does it look like? And we have a leadership team now that's there's 9 members, which is a little bit big. They say 5 to 7 is good. We're in a super hyper growth mode right now, so having 9 members, including myself, is probably right where we need to be, and we feel comfortable with that. But when you look at your leadership team, what are your core functions you do in your company? And a lot of times people will have the same person, say, in sales and marketing. But then as you grow to a larger organization, you might split that off and have marketing in one and one person responsible for it in sales. But I think the biggest thing, we talked about ownership and we talked about accountability, and that, your leadership team needs to take that ownership and accountability. But the overarching theme is if one of us fails, we all fail. And that's what we try to have now on our leadership team, is that I know you're ultimately responsible for whatever you're responsible for, but us as a team are responsible for making sure that we succeed. And that's a mental mind shift. Not everybody has that on their leadership team. And I'm real excited to see how our leadership team, and the current one we have now, has really only been there for about nine-ish months, and kind of growing what that looks like, developing our trust, and really developing the understanding that, hey, we all have, in order for us to succeed, we all have to succeed.
Yeah. And an interesting thing that you brought up was, like, for instance, like sales and marketing. And then as you grow, maybe it starts with one, and then as you grow, maybe it splits off, and now there's a different representation for sales and a different representation for marketing and the leadership. What is kind of like the process for determining, when you want to make that change? Or
Yeah, so that's interesting. And if I kind of boil that down, is how do you decide who's on your leadership team and when and where? And I do remember a time, Dario, that I probably not too proud of, that you were on our leadership team. We were having our offsite discussing what roles we needed on our leadership team. It was decided then and there that you weren't the right person. And we're like, all right, Dario, well, you're not on the leadership team anymore. You don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting. And it's like, well, it's probably not handled quite right. I appreciate you still working for us for 14 years after we kind of did that to you. But it's a hard decision, right? So what we do is we follow EOS, and EOS has an accountability chart, and you remove people's names and you put functions. And then when you go to then fill it back, you try to take the politics out, which this is the part where the book is really good at it. It says, oh, you put the right person in the right seat, and you have them make sure they carry on. Way easier said than done. Way easier said than done. And there's always that's my role. And one thing we found that has helped is if you feel your organization is going to need to have a separate sales and marketing role, list out the different responsibilities for each one, and then say, okay, leadership person, you're going to fill both of these seats because you have to put a name in both of them. But when we get big enough, we're going to split these out. And then it's very clearly delineated what needs to be split. Because what happens a lot is tell somebody, well, you're going to have to give up sales and marketing and only do one. Well, they'll be like, well, I like doing this little part of sales and I like doing all of marketing. So I'm going to do marketing and a little bit of the sales. And really, you split it ahead of time. But I would say it's probably one of the biggest challenges with a growing company is, when do you have to remove someone from leadership team? What do you do? The coaching part of it is so big for me. I never want to blindside somebody and be like, all right, you're no longer on the team, which I honestly feel we did for to you, Dario. I apologize for that. Looking back, you learn so much more when you're like, wow, that was kind of a blindside. And I think ultimately it was the right decision for Wisper at the time, or I wouldn't have done it, but it could have been handled differently. But when you look at your team and what we're bringing and what the responsibilities are, that accountability and who is responsible for what, and if they aren't getting what they need to get done, you got to have some of those hard discussions and hard talks, and you fret over them. It takes years and years and years, sometimes months, whatever, and should I do it? How do I do it? What do I do? And you try to coach up. And then ultimately, when you do it, you're like, look back and you're like, that wasn't that painful. And well, look what we have now. It's amazing. We've done so much better. Whereas a lot of owners I know it's one of the hardest things is how do you take somebody off the team? Sometimes it's family, right? It's family members that are on the team. How do you do that? Other times it's people you've known for 14 years. And I try to boil it down in my head is that, Wisper has continued to grow, and our needs from our leaders have changed. And if you haven't grown as a person, that's why I preach very, very firmly that personal growth is number one, because if you don't personally grow, Wisper will outgrow you in whatever role you're in. It doesn't matter if you're an installer all the way up to the CEO. If you don't continue to grow as a person, your role will change, because we are a changing company. And what used to work for us with 4,000 customers doesn't work for us with 22,000 customers. And that's something that I have to keeping in the back of my mind when I'm having those tough conversations about what is working, what isn't working, and what do we need to change.
Yeah, and it was interesting, like in the beginning time, because I wouldn't even say that it was truly the leadership team as it is today. It was more so of that where we were all managers and we were kind of the beginning coming of a leadership team, which that whole experience was kind of, looking back on it, obviously when it was happening, it was kind of like, whoa, what just happened? But but it was like it was a group, and it was like I was being voted off the island because
you were.
Like,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I know so much more now.
It was like 6 guys that wanted me gone. 2 was like, no, he can stay on the island, but the 6th one, and it was just like, he's off the island. So but it was a great experience. Like I said, I'm still here and I still love it. Determining though, like the right person, right seat, you talked about that. I know the book talks about right person, right seat. You did speak a little bit about it. Is there a metric that you use to determine the right person, right seat, or is it?
Yes. Yeah. So we do. So we actually have, EOS has a form, and it has to do with your core values. And then, so your core values are plus, minus. So most of the time they do it, some of the times they do it, and most of the time they don't. And you would rank your leadership on that, your each individual person. And then you have, get it. Do they actually understand the role? Do they understand what's required of them to do that role? Do they have the capacity, right? So mentally, can they actually do what they need to do, or time-wise? You may be the best programmer in the world, but if you're doing 10 other things, you don't have time to program. So you don't have the capacity to really do it. And so there's two kind of forms of capacity: is the mental capacity to get it done, and then also time. And then the last one is want it. And sometimes people are really good at things that they just don't want to do. It's not their passion. It's not what they want to do. And it may sound like, wait a minute, how do you boil it down to just that? But it's a pretty simple process, but you have to answer honestly, and you have to. And one of the things I was kind of running into is that as the CEO, people would act differently around me, and then go act different around other people. And so when they were around me, I'm like, oh, that person does this all the time. I mean, all I see is them doing this. This is great. They fit our core values really well. And then other people don't speak up because on the leadership, that's a leadership team person. I might lose my job if I speak up. And, we always preach, speak up. We're all about making Wisper better. And if I'm the problem, you got to let me know, because if you don't let me know, I can't fix it. So it was kind of interesting to see when we started going through the core values, and then the get it, want it, and have the capacity to do it, how that ranked up. And sometimes it's that hard conversation you have to say when it doesn't really fit what we're looking for.
And I did like the GWC, the get it, want it capacity. So it gave you the opportunity, and if you answer correctly from like the employee side, you're a little bit afraid to really answer that honestly. So you want to put, yes, I get it. Yes, I have the capacity to do it. And yes, I want to do it, because you're afraid that if you put, I have the capacity, I get it, I understand it, but I don't really want to do it, then what is the employer going to do when I answer that I don't really want to do this? Right. But if you answer it honestly, then it gives the company the opportunity to really look at it and say, okay, well, if this person really does not want to do this, let's find something that they really enjoy doing, and let's put them there. And that's the greatest opportunity for an employee to succeed, is if an employer gives you that opportunity to fill out that form or go through that exercise, please take the opportunity to answer it correctly, because life is so much easier when you're working and doing something that you want to do, have the capacity to do, as opposed to the other side of it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because, not all companies are like that. If you walked into a big company, even sometimes the small companies, and you tell them, hey, I don't really like doing my job, they're going to be like, oh, well, we don't need you anyway, so see ya. And you say, wait a minute, the statistics show that like 70% of people don't like the job they're in. And we try to be different than that. And I know it's hard for some employees to come in that they think, oh, I don't like my job, I thought it was going to be something else, and they feel like they have to leave the company. It's like, no, if you're a good cultural fit, you meet our core values, and you have a good work ethic and attitude, where can we put you to makes you be a rock star? Because I want all of our employees to be that rock star. But that's hard. It's like what do I say? I'm not, if I say something, then I might lose my job, or they won't pick me for the next role. And it's like, no, we want you to love where you are. And it takes some real, faith in the process, and that's what we stand by. And when we do it for a couple of employees, then the other ones see it and they're like, wow, that actually really did work out well. Yes. But they don't all see that. You're right.
Yeah. And it's, I guess the longer you're with the company, you get more comfortable in being able to answer those questions. And like I said, I'm the perfect example of that here. It was when it came to management. I get it. I have the capacity to do it, but it was like, did I really want it? And once I answered that question, I was a little bit concerned, but it ultimately worked out, in the greatest form that it could have, because I get to actually work in my strengths and do what it is that I love to do daily. So,
absolutely.
All right. And then you did speak about your leadership team and core values. Is there, I know they have to have the core values. Is there like a frequent check other than people coming to you and say, hey, this person is not matching the core values? How is that checksum still kind of carried out?
Yeah, so we do, the get it, want it, and the capacity, you have to be a plus on all of those, right? Because it doesn't work like you were saying, like I get it, I have the capacity to do it, and I don't want to do it. Well, that doesn't work, right? So you if any one of those three are a negative or a plus minus, then you only have an option of plus and minus. On the core values, though, it is a plus, minus. And normally in the company, we say, well, you don't have to have all of our core values. We just want you to have most of our core values. And that's something that we pick up. Is it you have to have 3 pluses and then the other 2 can be plus minuses? Or maybe we're like, hey, no, you have to have 2 pluses and 1 minus is okay. And it just depends on where you are in your company and what you're doing. But I would say that the higher you go in the leadership ladder, the more critical we are that you have to match our core values.
Yeah.
And you have to, because let's say one of our core values is committing to helping each other, right? So we're committed to helping each other, team atmosphere. If we have a leadership person that has a negative on that, what do we stand for? What are we doing? They don't like helping each other. They don't like helping others. They're not the person. You wouldn't go to them because you need help. You would actually kind of shy away from them. And that doesn't work for me. I want all my leadership team, they need to be pluses across the board. Now, obviously, when we hire somebody, we do different tests and ask different questions to see about their core values. And they may come in as a plus minus. And then I always say, well, like once the honeymoon period is over, right? Once that 90 day to 180 day is over, you kind of truly learn who they are. And if they have any plus minuses, then we want to work on those, because we do hold our leadership team to a much higher standard, because we want other people to mimic you and the leadership team. And if we have people who have a negative in some of those, our core values, we've determined that these 5 core values are core, as the name says, to our success as a company. And this is what we want to hire by. And if we miss that mark in a leadership person, it's way more detrimental than if we miss the mark in a field installer. So we try to hold them to a higher standard. We do a quarterly conversation. It's also another thing that EOS does. And you literally talk about each core value. How are you living this out? How do you think you could do it better? Are you seeing anything that maybe they aren't living out, or what does it look like? And again, these aren't to tell a person that they're a bad person. Just because you don't have my set of core values, Wisper's set of core values, doesn't mean you're bad. It just means you may not want to work here, right? Because it's not going to be, you're going to be going in your direction while everybody else is trying to go in that direction. And go be a rock star somewhere else that they follow your core values and everything. That's awesome. But these are the set of core values that we've set for our company. And we hire by them, we fire by them, and we promote by them.
As far as like continuous training and coaching around leadership, is there anything that the leadership team is not as where you've arrived, you're now leadership and you're just released? I'm pretty sure there's still some coaching and some training that goes along with, continued leadership development.
So I hope and pray that none of my leadership team ever says, I have arrived, because it is a journey. We do build to lead. Just like we've opened up for our whole company, and anybody who sees these broadcasts that wants to join, we do build to lead. And we, though, as a leadership team, have our own practices. We have a 2-hour practice every 2 weeks where we work on ourselves, our core. What could we do better? What could we do differently? And we're always learning. We had I call it an incident, but we had an incident this week where we're trying to choose, as a company, we're trying to choose a CRM project or a program. Where do we want to go with the CRM? We desperately need one. What do we need to do? And we have some of our leadership team is assigned to doing that. And they were kind of not nonchalantly, but just in side conversations, they were thinking, oh, well, we're going to go down the path of this one company. And my background's in software design, so it kept nagging at me like, oh, I don't know that company is the right one. And I tried to go in and talk to our leadership person that's running that process and be like, hey, I'm not going to overrule you, but just have you thought about these and have you thought about that? And I have to remember that me as a CEO, my word carries way more weight, whereas in my mind it doesn't carry more weight. I'm just asking questions and I'm interested, but really I handled that situation wrong. And our COO Jenny was like, hey, we need to debrief. How could you have done that better and different? It's like, oh yeah, I see. Because in my mind, I was doing what I should have done. I was just challenging the person who was doing it. Have you thought about this? Have you worked on through this? And it didn't come across that way. And that was my mistake. I should have done it something differently. And that's where we're all leaders and we're all learning. And again, when leaders are held to higher standards, which rightfully so, I find it funny. There was you're a basketball fan. You probably know which basketball player said this when he said, "Well, I don't want to be a role model to the kids," because somebody was razzing on him for doing something bad. He's like, "I don't want to be a role model." It's like, you don't get that choice, right?
That was Sir Charles Barkley.
Yes, you are a role model whether you want it to be, and if you're a bad role model, then people can make comments about you and everything, and that's, you don't get to choose that. That comes with the territory of being a leader, is that people will look up to you and will either want to mimic you or not want to work for you because they don't like that. So we're always going through leadership. I still read a book a week and try to figure out how I can be better, or what should I be looking at things differently, because it's you've never arrived. And one thing nice at Wisper, because we are growing, is we're not a 20-year-old company that hasn't changed over the last 20 years. I mean, in a blink of an eye, in a year from now, we could be double the size. That's a major change. And that we've already hired 120 people in the last year, and we've doubled our size of employees, and we're working on the customers. There's always so much more to learn about how, and maybe that's why one of our core values is, lifelong learner, right? Yes. We're always trying to learn, always trying to be better. And a lot of people struggle with it because, like, wait a minute, why are you giving me this feedback? This is bad feedback. It's negative. No. It's an observation that maybe you weren't aware of, and we're just trying to make everybody better and work through that. But it's always a struggle, and it's usually when the egos get in the way is when it doesn't work so well.
Yeah, and it's like we're almost like kind of transitioning into it, because my next question is going to be, how is it, or when do you make that determining, and what is the determining factor of when someone is no longer a fit for the leadership team, and how do you go about having that conversation with that person other than day of the meeting, having them voted off the island right then and there?
So it's interesting, and I'm only going to go through my experiences that I've had over the 17 years, is that the people below the leadership person know well before I have ever known that somebody isn't doing what they need to do. I am not a strong follow-up person or follow-through person. I tend to, if we talk about it and we say you're going to do it, then I assume it's done. I'm a very, very hands-off manager. Probably so much, opposite of a micromanager in a negative way, because I'm so far that way. And then it would be like 6 months or a year from now, be like, oh, didn't you get this done? No, we didn't. Oh, it's like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know, So I found that as we removed different people from the leadership team, some were removed because the needs of the company changed. Like, I think it was shortly after you had been dropped off the leadership team. I think we had like 13 people still on our leadership team at that time. Yes. And, I'm like, well, I love all of you, but we have to get this down to like 8, right? And how do we restructure? And those are some of the painful conversations, because as the company grows, now we weren't implementing EOS at all that time, so we didn't have quite the structure. And that's where EOS makes it a little bit easier, a lot easier, I would say, with the accountability chart, because it's a lot more clear what somebody's roles and responsibilities are. And what they're supposed to be doing. We did have a CEO or COO that we had brought in that just wasn't doing his job. He'd gone through the honeymoon period, and we were implementing EOS at that time. So we had rocks, and he had missed his rocks every single quarter. And finally, when I had that conversation with him, the first time he missed, it was like, oh, we understand, you're new. But the second time you missed the rocks, it's like, no. So we started having that conversation. He's like, well, I want examples of where I haven't performed. I'm like, well, here you go. It's all in writing, not tracking. But he would tell us they were all tracking until the end and not get it done. And he then very quickly said, so you're telling me I need to find a new job? I'm like, no, I'm telling you that you need to improve. And he ultimately ended up quitting. So that was an easier conversation. I think the harder conversation, so I think it's easier to let someone either go or remove them from the leadership team if they aren't performing, right? Like if they aren't getting their tasks done and they aren't doing their to-dos, that's an easier thing to get done. The harder one is when they're not necessarily a cultural fit, or they used to be a rock star before, but now the company's grown and they don't scale with the company and they just aren't getting what they need to get done. Those are much harder discussions to have. I know we've had a lot of those tough discussions, and some leadership team members embrace it and say, wow, I didn't realize that. I'm going to step up my game. What am I to do to change? Let's talk about this. Other ones say, no, I don't need to change. I'm good. I know exactly what I need to do. I am who I am. It's like, no, there's a problem here. And ultimately, you mix family in there, and now you have a family member that's partial owner. And that's one of the things that I like. I was talking to one of my friends who was talking about it, where, ownership doesn't mean you're on the leadership team. Ownership means you own part of the company and you might be on the board, but ownership doesn't mean you necessarily have a spot at the operating leadership team. But we ultimately, when you bring in an outsider, sometimes that helps you identify who's not fitting right. Building a team is not necessarily my forte. I want all my team to be an awesome team, but I'm learning how to hold people accountable and build a strong team. But we brought in an outside COO, someone who had no background, no history with the company, and they were able to ask some of those really challenging questions. And it happens to be that her forte is building teams and how do you fit them all together. So if you're struggling as an owner as to, deep down inside, this person isn't cutting it, but you can't get through to them, you might either step up and have to make that hard decision, or bringing in an outside person to kind of help have some of those conversations that you have to have that are tough. I'm non-confrontational by nature, but I'm learning that sometimes I have to be the leader, and if I'm a leader that can't remove people from my leadership team that aren't performing the way they need to per what Wisper needs, then I'm going to start to lose people following me. My good employees might start to leave because I'm not dealing with the ones that everybody sees it way more than I do of how somebody isn't working. So it's not easy. But I promise everyone that if you do it and you make the changes you need, you will realize on the other side that it's not nearly as bad as you thought it was going to be. And it's actually usually way, way better.
Yeah. And that even is trickled down too as well for the rest of your company and employees, because you can have that person that's in management, that's in leadership, and you will have the employees who work underneath them that, as you say, they're not reporting and they're not coming back, and because no one really wants to, I'm not going to go tell on my manager, right? I'm not going to go tell on that leadership person, right. But if you, and I've seen this too, after we've gotten rid of some leadership members and even managers, the entire department then exhales now, right? Like, he or she is gone now, and it's like it's breathing new life into that department where they were being smothered out before. So, and you don't realize that until after the fact. But it is, like you said, it's a hard decision to make, but you will see the justification once it's made and how much better those departments will perform once you make some of those critical changes that needed to be made. So, yeah, absolutely. You'll lose lots of sleep over it because, you're affecting somebody's livelihood and what to do. And I have to just keep coming back. Did I do everything I possibly could to help them become the person they needed to become the person that Wisper needed to be? And then ultimately, if they don't, then that was a decision they made, not a decision I made. But did I do everything that we could? And it's still hard. It's still really, really hard to make those decisions. I don't think it'll get easier either. I think it'll get harder, but still got to continue to make those choices. So I guess that's going to go ahead and do it for us here. We'll go ahead and get wrapped up. Again, I am your guest host on this episode of Wisper University, Dario Mackins, and again, Nathan Stute. If you do have any questions or comments, you can always drop those in our comment sections, or you can always go to our website. We do have our Wisper University channel on Facebook, and you can reach out to us by contacting us at 800-765-7772, or shoot us an email, and we'll make sure to answer any questions that you may have. And on that note, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of Wisper University, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for being a guest host and wearing red. I approve. Yes. All right. We'll see everyone next time. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.